Free Hands Friday, number 22. Today we have Rick BYER with us, and Dale Ladiseur was supposed to be interviewing Rick, and she was involved in a storm and a power outage just as we were trying to get connected. So we're getting a little bit of a late start, and I get to go ahead and do the interview with Rick. So welcome, Rick. And thanks for putting up with all of these difficulties, these technical difficulties. Why don't you give us a little bit of background on how you got started in music? Why don't we start with that?
Wow. Okay. The first thing that ever happened to me that was musical is I was 3 years old, and my uncle put me. He played in a band in Expo '67 in Montreal, which was a big exposition, and he brought me on stage to play with his band, percussion. So that was my first introduction into being a musician. It was pretty mind blowing, and then after that, like just a few hours after that, I would go and see. My first concert was to watch a Motown review, basically with Diana Ross and the Temptations and Marvin Gaye, and so that was my first real introduction into music. And then the second big thing I can really remember making me decide I was going to be a musician was seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan.
So when you said you got invited up on stage to play,
yeah.
So then, I mean, you had already been like doing some kind of percussion type of stuff.
Yeah. When I was very young, my family knew that I used to like to hit things, and so they bought me one of those, those really like plastic drum sets. And I used to put myself in front of the television and watch the Mickey Mouse show because there used to be a kid on it who played drums, and then I would play drums to that, and then I'd play drums to the Archies. I used to love Jughead because he would be up there playing to these songs. So I'm a big Archies fan, and and then he had bought me a bongo drum, and I was always playing a bongo. And so when his band went up in Expo '67, he said, "Yeah, come on up and play." I did a set with them, and it was a mind blowing experience, really. And just said, "Oh yeah, I got to do this. This is what I have to do for a living."
That's a really cool way that you got into it. I never would have imagined. I guess I should have watched more cartoons and stuff and played along. So then what happened next? Did you continue pursuing the percussion, or?
No. Well, that's not true. Yes, I did, but not until I was 13. And when I was 13, I got a drum set, and played with neighborhood guys, played in a band with neighborhood guys. But 6 months after that, I decided I wanted to take up guitar. I took up guitar, and I played guitar all throughout high school. And then after high school, I switched over to bass because I really got into Mick Karn. Mick Karn just kind of blew my mind. All the sounds he was getting on the fretless, and at the same time there was some sort of serendipity that a bunch of guys I was playing with, who I wanted to play with, needed a bass player. So at that time, I'd switched over. And then a few years after that, I bought a stick after seeing. Do you remember Dale this week? She put up that Friday's video of Tony playing with King Crimson.
Yes. I wanted to go back to the bass. Did you jump in on fretless?
Yeah. Pretty well.
Okay.
Because I really wanted to make sounds like Mick Karn. He was a bass player like no other. It was the whole way of sliding and moving in notes. He wasn't only playing rhythmically. He was just making all these like meow sounds, And I just completely got absorbed and amazed by that. And it was part of the reason I also liked Tony, because of the beginning of Elephant Talk. It doesn't sound like it's a fretted instrument. It sounds like the notes are sliding and moving into each other, and that sound really, really did it for me. And
so you heard that, and then you decided you were going to get a stick, and then what did you know about it? Had you seen pictures? Were you just going on the sound? What happened next?
Well, it was from watching that Fridays thing. Both my friend and I had seen that actual presentation that night of Friday on Fridays, and our mouths just went like this. Blah. It was just so cool. It was so cool. And then Dune came out just a little after that, and then you saw Patrick Stewart playing a stick as one of the characters in Dune. And because I was a bass player, it's all this serendipitous thing going on because I was a bass player, but I still loved guitar solos. I absolutely adored guitar solos. And so I figured, well, I'm still a bass player, so why don't I get an instrument where I could be a bass player and at the same time still pursue my love of guitar solos and tone. So it was trying to really to bring the two together into one instrument that made me decide that I was going to get a stick. And when I got it, I really literally was only playing one part at a time. I never even considered playing the two parts. When I got it, I was a bass player, or I was going to do solo on the sticks, on the upper range stuff. And so I treated it like a guitar, and I treated it like a bass, as two separate things, never as a whole. And up until I was in my late 20s, I only played in original bands, and so all the stuff I played on stick was stuff I wrote. And when you get a stick, you can just make a lot of noise on it, and you can sound musical. You don't have to know what you're doing at first. It's only if you want to really get serious on it and start playing, then you have to really put in the work. But you can get away for years of just sitting down and just banging it and tapping it, and something cool can come out, and you can write songs out of that without actually knowing the instrument. So I did that for a long time. I did that for like about 5 years.
So you did that more so than like working through freehands or studying some other material.
Yes. Yeah, because I was writing music and playing in bands. So and at the time, really, I was never considered, because I had a great guitarist and a good band, so I could just play bass. But once in a while, if he wanted to play chords and do kind of like soundscapes, then that would give me a chance to do solos, and that was enough for me to do, So.
And you were singing at the time too?
Mostly backup. On occasion, I would sing, but mostly backup.
So you get this new instrument, you got two sides, two rolls, and you're singing on top of it, and you're writing.
Yeah.
That seems like a manageable workload.
But it was good. It was a good. I mean, it was a really cool. It was good. It was a good school of learning. But that'll only take you so far. And then when you decide you really want to get into it, then you start realizing that the instrument is not a bass and it's not a guitar. It's its own entity, and that's when the real work happens. And I kind of got scared, and not only scared, but didn't really have the time, because I was gigging a lot and all that. And it requires that you put in a lot of hours. If you want to be really good at it, it requires so much work. This thing, I love it. I love it to bits, but it is by far the hardest instrument I've ever played, and it's still to this day. I put in a lot of hours.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say you were scared. It makes you more human, brings you back down to our level. So cool. Somewhere along the way, though, you kept pursuing multi-string or basses and that type of stuff.
I did, and that was because of my love of guitar solos. Yeah, at one point I had to get at the end of the '90s. I'd sold my stick to buy a six-string, and at the time, six strings were very well. It was at late '80s, early '90s. Six strings were really rare, and so to finance getting a six-string, I had to get rid of my stick, and so I got rid of my stick.
For how long?
For 5 years.
Whoa.
For 5 years. But the thing is, I didn't have one. It's a strange story. I actually didn't have one again until September. But the one I'm playing right now was the one I was supposed to buy in the '90s, because it belonged to my best friend, who was watching Fridays, the the King Crimson video with me at the same time. So I'm destined to own this instrument. You know, I'm not getting another one because this one just finds its way back to me all the time. It was there. It was there when he first got it. In the 90s when I started taking it up. I guess it was around 94 again. It was that instrument that came to me. I'd had two to choose from. It was that one and a poly. A friend of mine had a poly as well, and he wanted to get rid of his polycarbonate, but I preferred the wood. The sound was very different between the poly and the old ironwood.
So there were two other stick players that you were
in
friends
my
with.
neighborhood.
In your neighborhood. And then how did that work out as far as playing together or helping each other or teaching, or was there a sharing of information there that helped?
No, we were just good friends. We were just good friends. But you know, once you have a stick, everybody wants you in one band. So you know, the three of us ended up being in separate bands because it was such a rare instrument. My friend, well, the stick I have now was the first one that was in Montreal. It was the first stick in Montreal, and he got it, and then I got mine about a year and a half later, which was an ironwood too. And then my friend got the poly. Another friend of mine got a poly after that. But all of them, they didn't stick at it either. So I had this option of when I was getting back into it in the 90s to choose one to buy. But what happened is, as I was going to buy it, I ended up moving to Thailand. And I didn't buy it because I needed the funds to go to Thailand. So, and when I went back home to visit Montreal this time, I said, "You still got your stick?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, so now I have the stick." This one.
Well, I'm glad it made its way back. It's like the boomerang stick, but I'm glad it made its way back so you could continue your journey on the instrument, definitely. So I don't want to jump too far ahead, so fill in the gaps in case I am. But then at some point, you were doing recordings, or you met up with, oh shoot, I can't, Gavin Harrison. Yeah. Is that a good place to jump to?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, well, when I moved to England, well, it's a bit of the story between the 90s and my moving to Thailand was that I was kind of in the music business, and I found out what the music business was really like, which is really, it's not about music, it's about business. And that put me in some sort of a funk for a while. And so I ended up starting to play covers, and then I moved to Thailand. Where was I going with this? Yeah.
Somehow we're getting to Gavin.
Yeah, oh, right, we're getting to Gavin. Okay. And so what happened is I lived in Thailand for 8 years, moved to England, met my wife, moved to England, and then, you know, I had to start from scratch, knew nobody here. And so I started putting my stuff out on MySpace. I'd stopped writing for about a 10-year period because of just the whole music business thing. It really did my head in, the whole music business. Record labels and all that. It really, because it completely destroyed all the mythology I had in my head about the music business, and that it was not about music. And to me, that was so dear. And to find out that the business I wanted to be in, which wasn't about music, but it was about making other people money, basically. That really did my head in. And so when I finally moved to England, I started getting the bug to write again, big time. And while I was out in Thailand, I took up drumming very seriously. And I was a drummer, basically strictly a drummer, no bass, no any other instruments for a while. But when I moved to England, I decided, okay, I'm going to start writing again, and I put my stuff out on MySpace. And Gav, again, more serendipity going on here. At the same time that Gav was coming to play in Cambridge, which is where I was living in the UK, about 3 of his friends had heard my stuff on MySpace and said to him, "You've got to hear this guy." So when his band Porcupine Tree was coming to Cambridge, he said, "Rick, why don't you come down?" and we met up then, and from then on we just started collaborating. He had a whole bunch of drum ideas, and me being a drummer, I understood a lot of the ideas he was doing. And if you are a drummer, you tend not to get very much respect when it comes to songwriting in a band. In a band, they want to just put you in your corner. Look, you be responsible for rhythms, and that's it. You know, I've encountered that many a time, and they don't want to think that, you know, just because you're a drummer that you are a songwriter. You can be a songwriter. And Gav is very much a musical composer on the drums. He thinks he's got ideas, he's got themes, and I understood it right away. I understood what he was getting at, and he had all these ideas that he couldn't use. He said, "Look, I got all this stuff. Send it to me." And that's when I started picking up playing bass and multi-stringed instruments again, which was around 2006. And
wow, the breaks that you took are amazing. I never would have thought that was your background. I came in here expecting to hear you say, I started practicing so many years ago, and I just stopped a few minutes ago to join this call. But besides the serendipity of two drummers, were your musical tastes, they obviously were compatible, but how similar were they as you moved ahead in writing?
well, Gav is very much interested in rhythmic illusion, which I love. I absolutely love. We had just a common love of certain drummers and what they brought to drumming. I mean, I consider myself a big student of drums as well, and we just got on. We just had a big understanding of what we liked drumming, and I was getting back. I hadn't completely lost my playing ability, but I was rusty. I mean, I would have never been able to go out and gig as a bass player or a stick player or anything like that. It had been since 90. It was about 7 years. I could still noodle and I could still play. I still had the facility, but I didn't have stamina or, you know, the muscle memory that's required to play stuff live. So, but it was great for me to start writing. And through the writing process, I started getting back some of the old muscle memory and the old tunes and the old ideas again about with stringed instruments, with why I love them, bass and guitar, and that's in a way what led me right back to the stick. I've come full circle basically, that I can get an instrument where I can play my solos and play what I love best, play bass and play solos. My favorite lineup is a trio. I was like Rush and Cream and I mean, to me, Zeppelin is really a trio with a singer, you know.
Right, and now it can be a duo because you're like the two people. Could you talk a little bit about your approach to writing, and then how that might have changed as you worked with Gavin?
Well, it actually didn't. It didn't change. What I basically do is, it's not really difficult. Is you put on a groove, and you just jam with it until something comes that makes you go, I mean, Dale elaborated on that the last time when I saw her on it. Until something that makes you go, it makes me turn my head and just go, oh, okay. 'Cause I think at one point, when you're first starting, you're not really open, but you end up becoming, when you kind of zen into it, you become a channel, and once that opens up, you're not playing, it's playing you. And then that's when the ideas start to flow. And when you're not consciously trying to force something, and that's basically what I try and do, is get myself into that spot where the ideas can come and they play. And lucky for me, I just record and record and record until, wow, okay, something's happened, click, and then that's the beginning of how the song will take its shape.
So you got something happening, and then based on that feel, that's where lyrics come in, if they're lyrics.
Yeah. That's it. The lyrics are always the last thing to come, and that's dictated by how the music makes me feel about it. whether it feels hopeful, whether it feels pensive or thoughtful, I don't know, grateful, all, all those.
Right.
I'm trying to stay away from the dark stuff now. The world is so dark; it doesn't need any more darkness. I know I'm going to get shot for this, but I really don't think the world needs any more heavy stuff. There's a lot of heavy energy in the air right now, and I'm just thinking that the world needs
That's
maybe
fine.
something a bit lighter.
No, nobody's going to complain and say, we need more dark stuff. Why isn't Rick doing dark stuff? Okay, so you talked about starting with a groove. You find something or hear something that speaks to you.
Yeah.
What if Gavin comes in with a groove and it needs to speak with you, or you change it, or it goes back and forth, whoever? I'm just trying to get an idea of the collaboration.
There's two things. I mean, Gav sends me a lot of drum ideas, so I already have basically a drum track to work to. You know, I have grooves to work to. But part of my own practice schedule, my reward for doing all the bloody hard work is I allow myself to noodle. And at the end of the noodling, after you've done an hour and a half to 2 hours of practicing, you're itchy to just be free of the prison of what is you've been practicing the music. And that's where a lot of ideas come from as well. It's just because you've worked with a metronome for a while and you're working on some all of a sudden some barrier seems to break, and it's my favorite part of my practice schedule is I allow myself to noodle. I give myself a reward for doing it because
I love that. That's great advice. Yeah, that's absolutely what it is. The reward. You know, sometimes people are so diligent, and I'm practicing this for so much time, and you know, whatever, and now I'm wiped out and I stop. But I love that. Yeah, that's great. People should consider that. Going along with that trend, what other advice would you give to stick players? Things that you found in common with your bass playing that worked, that didn't, or anything.
Well, I'm very sound obsessed and sound, so I'm usually very quite clear about what kind of sound I'm going after, and I kind of obsess about finger placement and especially on a stick where it's ridiculously sensitive to which parts you play with your finger. You know, attack. There's always a sweet spot. I don't know if anybody plays tennis. You know, when you hit that spot in the middle where where when you hit you're not even really hitting it. The ball's just bouncing off naturally, and I find it's like that with the stick too. That if you hit this spot with a certain thing, the note blooms. I find it really hard to be really consistent with that, but this is what I obsess over: making sure that when I want to hit that blooming note, that I'm capable of doing that. Because when you hit that kind of note, then the note sustains. So these are little things I obsess over. And that blooming note is part of the tone that I hear in my head. Like I'm a big fan of Eric Johnson's tone, but I really love Holsworth's legato technique. So for right hand stuff, it's finding that sweet spot with my finger. And I found through the years that I use the kind of claw technique. I don't find I can't seem to hit that note to bloom when I'm hitting with my the pads of my finger. I've got to hit with the tips. It's got to be around the tip. So I've noticed, and when I'm using the tip, that I can get, and a lot of legato pull-offs when instead of tapping on the note, pulling off with one of my fingers to activate the note. It's kind of like a strum. Like, you know, when you hit a note with a guitar, it's a strum. But what you're doing is when you're pulling off with the note, you're letting the note resonate so that it sets up the vibration with the other finger. So, like, say if I am doing a 1-3. I don't know if this is going to help. I really didn't want to do this, but can you see this?
Yeah.
Say, okay, you're doing 1-3-4. Okay. What happens is when I want to pull off, by lifting the finger off, it activates the sound. So instead of tapping, so instead of going, I'll just pull off. Is that coming through there?
We can see it, but the sound it's too weak.
Let's see.
Right, right, yeah.
As opposed to tapping it, which is
right, right.
Use it as a legato, and you pull off to activate the next note. And that was a very important thing to discover for me. And another thing I found really important was to practice with the sound that you like. I know people go on about saying, you've got to practice clean and all that, but I found that I would not have discovered all this stuff if I had to practice clean. And by going for the tone that I had in my head, which is I've always been trying to get an Eric Johnson kind of tone, and to have that, it allows you to have sustain. And by having that sustain, that helped me develop the technique of doing this pull-off stuff, to be able to hear that. So I think it's really important that if you have a sound in your head, that you pursue that. For two reasons. One, you'll have your own individual sound. You'll be following something that comes from inside as opposed to being dictated to you from outside. And that in itself will help bring your personal technique to the instrument.
Right, and so obviously playing the sound, but it's not like people should, jam out a bunch of distortion when they're like learning how to play the finger
no.
cleanly. But I hear what you're saying. Yeah, play the sound and how it relates and what you need to do to make it what you're looking for. Because
I know that I wouldn't have come across this kind of legato technique had I not played with. I mean, I don't play with a lot of distortion pedals, but I do play with a bit of gain. And with a bit of gain, so that it allows the note to bloom, and it allows the note to have a longer decay, and that became very helpful in developing a vibrato on the stick, and trying to make the note sound more fluid.
Right. I've heard people talk about some playing sounding like typewriter playing, because sometimes we forget that. It's obviously the tap is important to do properly, and then once you get that, yes, do the other things like you've described and try to play more legato and experiment, because there are a lot of other techniques that are available, but on first look, one just thinks of tap, hold, release, repeat, wash, rinse,
right.
Continue, blah, blah, blah.
And admittedly, that comes from my love of guitar tones and guitar players, and even within guitar players, there's people. One of my best friends thinks that being a legato player is taking the easy way out. You've got to pick every single note. He's into that, like the Dimiola kind of and McLaughlin kind of thing, which is cool, but it's not something that fascinated me. I love cello players and violinists and that singing again, that tone that seems to just melt into each other. Notes that melt into each other, and it flows like a stream, as opposed to hearing constant staccato all the time.
Right.
And that's why I loved Mick Karn. It's also, I think, because of the lower tension in the bass on the stick, I can manage to make it sound a bit like a fretless sometimes, because I can bend into notes and slide into notes, which is why I really like, as a bass, the stick to me is the coolest sounding bass. It's got this wonderful attack, but there's all this variety you can get with just in bending in notes, and because of the tension of the strings, it gives you this elasticity in reaching notes and getting into notes and being able to, for me, as I say, make that streaming sound of that streaming tone. I don't know why I'm fascinated by that, but that sound just does it for me.
Yeah.
And it's what keeps me coming back all the time to it,
Cool. Well, don't leave so you won't have to come back. Okay. Okay. You took enough breaks. Sorry, I think to say that, Rick. Hey, why don't we get some questions in from Rob or comments? I saw his text. He's messaging me on the side. So go ahead, Rob. Unmute yourself and.
All right.
Gotcha.
Well, I'm going to kind of mix up the order here. First of all, I absolutely agree with you on starting with a sound you like. I've gotten a lot of crap for that perspective. I think it's because some people tend to use that as an excuse to buy way too much equipment and swap it out way too frequently. But I've always taken the perspective that music is creative, and when you're creating, you shouldn't make things hard on yourself. Human beings work in their environment. You know, we're animals. And when you want to make visual art, it's good to start with colors. Get your color palette right, and then you'll start to have ideas about the picture and the way the colors are going to mix. When you're writing a story, it's good to be somewhere that makes you think a certain way about characters, about setting, to think about certain music for a time period or something, a tone of the flow of the story. And when you're making music, if you're not hearing a sound you like that sounds like the song you want to write, you're just taking yourself out of the environment of the song. And so I was very glad to hear you say that because I thought it was just me. I always wanted to believe I was crazy.
No,
Uh,
I'm a slave. Hold on, I got to throw on a light. But I'm a slave to sound. I'm a big time slut. That's what's taken me into drumming. It's what's taken me into stick. It's what's taken me into music. I went into drumming just because I wanted to hear. I wanted to be able to get Bill Bruford snare sound, but I also wanted to get a Tony Williams ride sound. These things, these things are what drew me to the instruments. There was watching the Beatles, listening to Ringo Starr play, hearing that snare sound in Yellow Submarine when it starts going, talk, talk. There's something really, I can't explain it, but that's what drives me to playing things. And I basically want to incorporate that. But when I'm writing, I'm basically writing an album that that I would like to buy, that I want to hear. At the end of the day, that's what it is. It's taking all the combinations that I borrowed from everybody, because I'd be a liar to say that that I'm original. Maybe the combination of the sound of it ends up being original, but all it really is me wanting to have Bruford snare sound, Tony Williams ride, Mick Karn playing a stick, Holsworth with a Eric Johnson tone, with some Schofield lines, and making that into a piece of music, because they're all things I want to hear, but these guys won't get together, and it'll be my chance to kind of bring it all together, and then by doing that, I've ended up one way or another having some sort of sound that ends up being kind of my own, even though it's borrowed from everybody else. I think Miles said it best. He said, sometimes you got to play for a very long time before you can play like yourself.
Rick, are you involved in the how much of the recording aspects are you involved in? Are you involved with the sounds and
Oh
all the
yeah.
way down to like the mastering? So that's you.
I don't do mastering, but I do the mixing. I do my own engineering. I do very much so. I mean, it's taken me 5 years to get a drum sound, just from working trial and error to be able to translate that onto drums. That sound that I'm after, And so yeah, I'm very much involved in that. And same with my stick. I go absolutely mad with just the details of trying to get the tones I'm after, because that's really, at the end of the day, what's important to me. I mean, the song is the important thing. It's the vehicle, but it's being able to find that combination of sound that kind of moves me, and that's what I'm after. So yeah, that's it.
It comes through in the music that I've heard, in the videos that I've seen, and hearing you talk about it, it's obvious that it's just purely driven by your enthusiasm and the emotion for the music, and that comes through. And I think it's amazing that you are in charge of the whole thing beginning to end, and and you have the ability to contribute at each part to make sure that your vision never gets lost.
I mean, with the albums with Gav, I mean, it's a complete partnership. I mean, we do all our parts. Gav does all his own drumming in the studio and his own parts, and I do all my own parts in my own place, and we get together and mix it together. But for my own, for a lot of the other stuff that I do, I make sure that I'm involved with mic placement, and I do mixing, and it's very important because I mean throughout the years I've I'm not really good at the cover band thing, and I've got kicked out of a lot of bands in my life because I've had very strong opinions about how I wanted to sound, And
Gotcha.
it didn't make do me very well in the cover band scene, basically.
Okay.
So
Go ahead, Rob. Rob had,
yeah, sorry, Rob.
No problem. Before I get to the questions, I have to make sure I don't forget these comments.
Okay.
So you were talking about sustain and a blooming sound.
Yeah.
If you want that with a cleaner kind of tonality, a lot of people think sustain and bloom is more part of the territory with like a light crunch kind of gain.
Hmm.
And there is a style of guitar amp that has clean sustain like that, that in every respect of dynamics is gain, but it's still clean. And it's a Dumble style circuit.
Mm.
Uh, and that's actually what Eric Johnson used in the late 1980s.
Yeah,
He
I
used a
know.
Dumble style. And there actually is affordable Dumble in the form of amp in a box pedals, but for a bit more, there's a Malaysian manufacturer called Seriatone, and they have a
Yeah, I
line
know
called
of
the
it.
Overtone Specials.
I know of it.
All right, all right. Wanted to be sure. I'm telling you, man, I come from a gear background. I'm getting to actual playing, don't worry. Uh, but since you mentioned Eric Johnson, I have to point out that that's part of what brought me to Stick. I've been a huge Eric Johnson fan for a very long time, and I knew my left hand would never do those chord voicings ever
Mm.
in my life. And I saw the Stick as a way to cheat that, to be honest. Right hand plus the tuning, string to string.
Well, it's great. That's great about the stick. The polychords with the stick. That's another thing that just blew my mind is being able to play superimposed chords. It was just like it was a revelation to be able to to play superimposed chords over and hear them, and I've never looked back.
I used to down tune a six-string guitar in a tuning called Open C minor, which
Mm.
is two whole steps down the sixth string, and I wanted to have that low kind of root to the voicing of the chords and to my solo playing, because I'm very much a fan of sort of roots reggae and Mississippi Delta old blues, and
Right.
those low notes with a big fat string on them, there's a sort of doomish feeling, and so everything else is either in relation to the doom, positive or negative, because the
Yeah.
doom is what's happening. And I very much like that. I know you don't like dark music, but that's kind of where I'm at.
I
It's
don't
like
feel
that
it. I
sort of,
don't usually always feel it dark.
yeah, yeah. It's a sort of almost a Baroque feeling of this is an organ. It has massive low end, but also there's good news. Anyway, the I wanted to ask you,
Mm.
when you started on Stick, um, did the unique percussiveness of the bass attack,
Mm.
which I fell in love with, did that please you from a drum perspective, or did you not like it from a fretless bass perspective?
Oh no, it pleased me with that because then it allowed me to have a nice front end attack, but depending on where you hit, you have that attack, but depending on where you hit with your finger, it would allow it would allow the note to bloom. And when I say bloom, the only thing I can think of is when you hit it, all of a sudden this kind of like valve opens up. That is the kind of description that I can think of, and it happens at different frequencies, but it's the same principle that when you hit the note with a certain part of your finger, it's a sweet spot, and all the note will just go, wow. And I live for that. I just live for that, and it's part of what becomes the sound, because when you hit that wow, all of a sudden the note will open up, and it gives you this wonderful flowing sustain that happens. Uh,
that's very typical on fretless bass, and I've
it
heard
is
as
the valve
wow.
on the fretless.
Yeah, yeah.
It happens on stick too. It happens, but you got to really work hard to get that. And I can't do it consistently. I get it maybe about 50% of the time. And part of my practice schedule is just 15 minutes of just making sure I can get that note all the time because everything takes off from there for me. That's the starting point for any kind of line, whether it be in the bass or whether it be in the melody side. And with chords too. You get it with chords. You hit the chord. It's kind of like what naturally happens when you have compression, when you use a compressing pedal. You know, you'll get your attack and then it'll just open up. Well, I'm trying to get that same kind of effect, but just from hitting on the string, and it happens. But it's one of the most frustrating things. But if you work hard enough at it, you can get it.
Right. I imagine you practicing and saying, that blooming note. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Ever since you said blooming note, I kept thinking of that. My blooming notes aren't really good. Like, that blooming note, I'm going to get that. But I understand what you're saying. Go ahead, Rob. You got some more.
Rob, yeah.
Well, yeah, that blooming note's bloody difficult, isn't it? Couldn't help it. Okay, so, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, all right. One of the things I gradually had to wrap my geeky little head around was the fact that simplicity generates complexity. This came to me first in computer land. Very simple computer architectures require the programmer to handle all the complexity, which is why those computer architectures are the vast minority of the market. I fell in love with a board game called Go, and it's incredibly complex because there's only 4 rules. And it's amazingly more complex than chess because there's only 4 rules. There's no predefined rules. And I was thinking about that when you were talking about approaching the stick and how scary it was. And I wondered, when you're finding a groove, the way you is all right, fair enough. Try to be complimentary. When you're finding a groove and you're noodling on your way to where you're going, do you find that the sort of neutrality of the stick, the simplicity and neutrality of the stick, makes it easier to let yourself go, or do you find that you have to work that much harder to sort of find the place you want to be when you're playing?
Well, that's what becomes important is when I actually do my best. The practice always comes before doing that because part of the practice is part of the process in setting up that whole Zen approach for at the end of the practice schedule. It's the reward where I feel, okay, I've done what I had to do to improve my playing, to work on my weaknesses, but then I can let go and feel relaxed that I've done what I can that day. And by doing that, that kind of opens up the energy flow, which allows the playing to take place of itself. That's the only way I can think about it. I don't know if you guys have had this, but I mean, I speak to a lot of my musician friends, and the best nights you ever play is when you're not playing, it's playing you. When there is absolutely, you just literally, you're an observer or a puppet in playing. You're being played, and you just go, wow, this is amazing. I don't have to do anything. It's doing it itself, and the whole practice and then noodling aspect is the process to get to that place where I can let the energy flow without me getting in the way, because that's when really good stuff happens. I find it really difficult to do that on the gig. I find it a lot easier to do it after a good practice session.
Yeah, I think a lot of people actually are familiar with that, and where they lose it, where it seems unfamiliar, is actually the musical aspect. I mean, how many times have you cooked better than usual after yard work or something? You use up your mind on focusing on little things that are easy to think about, and you use up your body doing those little things. And so your body's tired, and your mind has sort of had its procedural requirements sort of used up. And so your mind's exercised, your body is exercised, and you're just left to be you.
Yes.
And the weirdest aspects of sort of tantric, Buddhist and Taoist and Hindu experiences, that seems to be what it's all about. You know, you do yoga, not so you can stand on one foot better, but so you don't waste all your energy walking when you don't need that energy to walk.
It's all about the release, basically. I mean, I do yoga as well, and it's all. I mean, having lived in Thailand for 8 years, that was a whole complete mind. It changed my whole perspective of kind of what life's about. and I say kind of because when you move back to the West, all these things you've acquired, just, the two systems collide, and you've got to try and find a medium between the two of them. But it's just like what you're saying. It's about the letting go. You have to be able to, and however device you use to get to that state is I use the practice and the noodling, which allows me to get to that state. Like all the great authors always say, you have to put the time aside to do it. And as with everything else, you get better at it the more you do it. So a large part of my day is in practice and then in writing, except for when I'm putting on a producer's hat or when I'm putting on a mixer's hat or whatever. But
did you develop that? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to ask, did you develop that perspective in Thailand? Because I just imagined you, because what I know about Thailand is Muay Thai, and I just imagined you seeing a Y crew and like having this creative, blissful moment or something.
No, it had nothing. I know Muay Thai, but no, I developed that actually more here, having had to deal with the confrontations of the different lifestyles of being in the West and the East. And trying to find a balance and trying to retain the best that I got from living out in Southeast Asia, and because I also got a bit bored with that lifestyle as well, living out there, and felt I had to come back here to get back to my roots, which is weird because I was born in the West, but to try and make an amalgam of the two, and so that's kind of it. How it didn't happen with time. It happened from me living here and realizing that I had to make peace of the two cultures that are very important to me. Because there's great things about being in the West as well, The
So
drive.
go ahead.
The drive to achieve. It's a paramount thing in the West, whereas if you're in the East, it's all about being. I think there needs to be there's a balance between the two. It's a fine line. Go to either side, and you could either be stuck in complacency with and that's possibly because I haven't gotten to the deepest level of being, but to the level I'm at right now, complacency and was a big issue with staying in the East, whereas coming to the West, there's the drive to achieve, but there was so much benefits of living in the East that I've spent the last 7 years, basically 8 years now, trying to come to have an amalgam of the two.
So I don't know how to transition from that because I'm thinking about it still. so I'll just jump in. What do you got going on now? Are you touring, playing out locally?
I did a few tours with Gav last year, and they're in the cards now for touring next year. I'm working on a 4th album with Gav, but at the same, which is going to be is mostly, I'd say it was 90% stick. There's a bit of guitar on it, but it's 90% stick. There's my solo album, which I do in between all these other projects I do, which is all stick, voice, and drums.
Any dates? Any projected dates on either when we should be looking for either of those?
The Gav one, I'm hoping to have the early next year. Right now, I play in an all-improv band called the Snow Giants, and I'm mixing that album right now. And I was just in the studio yesterday doing another jazz album with another Devon-based band called The Blowout, which I'll look at that after I finish doing the Snow Giants. The Snow Giants is going to come out September. Hopefully, my album will be December, and then the beginning of the year will be the next one with Gav, so that we can plan some touring, because the touring was really successful. We had a really good time going around Europe. Made a lot of new fans.
When you toured, how many other musicians were with you, or how
there was Gav and 2 other musicians. A guitar player who plays guitar, but he plays also guitar synth, and a bass player. I had to play guitar on these tours because I couldn't play the lines and sing them at the same time. So I had to write guitar lines, which were difficult, which were still, I should say they weren't difficult, but they were still difficult to do. But it was easier for me to do the guitar lines and sing.
So on the albums, it's just the two of you.
Yeah.
And then obviously to be able to pull that off live, and there's more folks. Yeah, it'd be great if you could get that stuff together on the stick and.
Well, that's part of my schedule is transferring all the guitar parts I played to play on a stick, but it's a lot more difficult to play it on a stick.
Yeah. Man, you are busy. Yeah.
I do actually have one more question I just thought of.
Sure, man. Sorry, man.
No worries. I have a weird rhythm. I'm constantly thinking, and I have to tell my brain when to shut up and come up with something more interesting. I don't know if you have this problem. I do. Okay, so when you're playing your stick, do you play more in position like a typical guitar player, or do you, since you started with a fretless bass, do you kind of slide around more and integrate that into your playing of the string, your approach to the string?
Neither. It's whatever is required at the time. I mean, I do scales and arpeggios, so that's to facilitate to be able to move, and I do them linearly as well as horizontally. I was a big fan of Holsworth, and when you see Holsworth playing, he's a very linear player. And fortunately for me, I've got a pretty good stretch. And it's not as big as Holsworth, but it's good enough that I can do the linear aspect of it too. So yeah, no, it's whatever the line, the tone that I'm trying to achieve, and the line requires. Because as you well know, you play the same note all over the stick, and the tone is very, very different. You know,
yeah, it's the best thing about stringed instruments is you can choose your string for the same note.
Yeah.
I always found that I like the same note in the fattest string I could possibly hit it on. That's just the sound I like. And I've seriously considered when I get my stick drilling out the tuning machine so I can go into dual bass reciprocal and just have all fat strings whenever I really want to get that way.
Which stick are you getting?
Oh, it's a rail board.
Okay.
Yeah, I find that I have a neuromuscular disorder, and so for the way my left hand works, which basically it always wants to make a fist,
Right.
having the sort of keel shape on the back of the rail board, that sort of I-beam look, that's absolutely everything for anchoring my thumb, because my left thumb can kind of go inside that, and then my right thumb goes on top because I've got a freer stretch on the right hand, and it makes for an equal reach, and it's just perfect. I couldn't play anything without it. And believe me, I tried.
I've discovered this with this round of playing the stick, and what happened. The guy who tipped me off is there's a great Russian player called Boris.
I think we all know who you're talking about.
I believe his last name is Bazarov. Yeah.
That's it. And he plays thumbless. And I started incorporating that in my right hand and have found it to be very helpful. I no longer anchor my right hand on the fretboard. Like when I'm playing right-handed now, I play it like this. So what that helps do is it helps mute some of the strings up here in the bass, because the bass still wants to resonate even. Especially with the older model here. I haven't tried any of the new models, but this older model, even with the felt, the bass wants to still resonate. So by having this around here, it stops the resonating, and I find that the mobility to be a lot easier now without anchoring my thumb on the back. So I now play like this, and I got that idea from watching him, because he's just completely free when he goes into all these places, and he's not. He doesn't seem to be hampered by his thumb. It requires a bit of getting used to and being a little bit outside the box. But once I started implementing that, I can't go back to anchoring my thumb now. It feels like it gets in the way, having that anchor.
Well, that sounds. Sorry.
So having with your thumb issue, maybe it's something you could consider as actually not anchoring your thumb with your right hand. I don't know what it's like. I've done it a bit on the left, and I haven't made that transition because you're playing up so much up higher, and when I'm playing up higher, I feel I need it more of an anchor. But when you're playing around this area, I find not having the thumb anchored really frees up a lot of energy to be able to move.
Rick, could you move your camera down? It looks like the red is right. There we go. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna have to hold it, I guess.
No, you don't. It was okay before. I think it just slipped the last time you moved.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. I was afraid you were going to disappear on us.
Getting back. It was a sort of inverted sunrise, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, whatever. Oh, I'm losing my brain here thinking about stick and okay. So I'll look into building up to that. Only my left hand really needs to anchor the thumb. That sort of allows my fingers to open in a weird way. Yeah, but on my right hand, I think that will be an option. Right now, I move freely with my right thumb, and I tend to use it as a cheat, really, because I tend to line up my index finger and my right thumb, and my right thumb sort of reminds me where I am, so I don't have to think about which fret and what distance. I just sort of line that up, and I have a common basis for my reach. And so I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to give that up, to be honest.
Russ, I wanted to ask you how you getting on with your NS?
Getting on well with it. Yeah, they're just to answer kind of briefly. I'm really trying to tap into the things that I learned about bass so long ago that they're ingrained in my brain and will never leave. And I'm trying to use that as a crossover. And one thing, it's funny when I play a bass line on the NS and I do it backwards because I'm so used to playing the stick.
Yeah.
And that's when I spend so much time trying to flip my brain around, and now I know it's flipped around, and I'm trying to flip it back a little bit. It's going well. Thanks for asking. Hey, we need to start wrapping up here, and
okay.
Rick, I wanted to give you a chance to mention anything we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about, including different plugs for where people should go to get the album or learn more about you, websites, anything like that, or anything that you just wanted to mention that I forgot about.
Okay, well, all my websites are being redone right now, so basically the best thing is either, if you want to pick up the music, Burning Shed, look for 05 Rick and Gavin Harrison. Actually, it'll be under Gav's name. Facebook. I spend quite a bit of time on that page to find out what's going on. The 05 Rick one. There's the Rick BYER one, but the 05 Rick has a lot more to do with what's going on musically with me.
Is there a story behind the 05 Rick? You tell us, then we'll never forget.
5 is my favorite number. That's part of it. I won't give it all away because but 5 being my favorite number. Born December 5th. So.
Okay, and it wouldn't stop you from getting a grand stick, 5566.
No. I'd almost gone for a grand, but I found just having 10 strings is more than enough for me to tackle. Even though the poly chords would sound amazing on the grand for sure. I know but with the finger spacing even closer on the grand, I think I would struggle with that.
Yeah, that is one nice element about the tens, is that little bit of extra space.
Yeah, I mean, right now I even struggle with just stumbling over myself on the 10. So I think if there were any closer, I'd really. Of course, you never know until you try it, but
right
now.
Right. Well, when I get my campaign together to have it build a 12-string with 10-string spacing, I'm going to call you.
Yeah.
So that would be like 2 of us, okay?
But then you have to afford it. That's the other side. Although they're not, the sticks aren't expensive as far as you know, for the quality workmanship. You know,
Oh, right.
you want to buy a bloody Federa, you got to pay like, I mean, they're great instruments, but they're like eight grand, $9,000. You know.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know,
A good Gretsch kit is like, you know, 4,000 or 5,000. So stick is amazing value for the money.
right, exactly. Okay, very good then. Rick, thank you so much. Oh, I know I was going to ask you real quick. Do you do any teaching? Because I think you might have some room on your schedule. Do you do teaching?
No, because I consider myself too much of a student still.
Okay. All right. There's that human element again. Because if you said, "Oh yeah, I teach and I donate time at the children's hospital," I'd be like, "Stop it, man." Okay. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to join us and putting up with our technical difficulties.
Thanks for having me. It's a blast.
Rob, thanks for joining us. I apologize to the people that wanted to get on that couldn't. I see that we do have 2 viewers, so some other people are watching this live. And as usual, it will go up to YouTube and be available for people to watch and see. I just have a couple of announcements here on what's coming up. And I was looking at my notes, and I've been giving out the wrong dates. I've been giving out like Sunday dates or something. It's Freehands Friday, you know. So anyway, I think these are the right dates now. August 1st, we're going to have Greg Howard, and then August 8th. Actually, the 8th, the 15th, and the 22nd are all related to the Freehands Academy that will be going on. So the 8th is like an introduction about that, and then on the 15th they're going to have State of the Stick address, and I don't know if you've seen that, but that the one from I guess last year or something, the last one is available on YouTube or something to watch. So that'll be real interesting. They're actually looking at possibly doing a simulcast, so if they can, you know, I have to say this with a straight face now, if they can iron out the technical difficulties, excuse me, after all we've been through today, good luck with that. Anyway, that'll be on the 15th, and August 22nd will be a follow-up to the entire Freehands Academy. So that will wrap it up for today. Thanks again to everyone, and happy Freehands Friday. See ya.
Cheers, man.